Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to get started in setting up a Celery progress bar. So what this means is that you'll have a progress bar inside your web application, for example, and the progress bar will update in real time, reflecting the processing state of a particular Celery task that you have within a project. So I'm going to show you what the result of this video will be. So here's a quick demo. If we take a look at this web application, it has a progress bar and a button on it called Start Task. So we can see that the progress bar is currently sitting at 0%. So whenever I click this button, Start Task, what that means is it will trigger a new Celery task to begin executing in the background. And this progress bar will reflect the current processing state of that Celery task in real time. So if I go ahead and I click the Start Task button, we can see that the progress bar has immediately jumped to 10%, and as time goes on and as the Celery task processes more of its things that it's doing, the progress bar increases in real time. We can see here in the logs that this task is already just completed at 100%. If we jump to the logs here, we can see that the task has completed here as well. So this is just a quick overview of what this video will entail. So in terms of getting started yourself, I have included a link in the video description to a repository called Docker Celery, which I've previously created. I've also went into greater detail about this repository in a previous video that I've created. You can feel free to check it out too. But if you clone this repository on your local machine, you'll be able to follow along with what I'm doing in this video and, just help you understand better how things are working. Once you've cloned that repository, you can just open it up in your local IDE. In this case, I'm using PyCharm. So I'm first just going to run through the client side of things and how this web application is working. So the web application is a React web application, and there is two components on the page. There is the progress bar, and then we have our button Start Task. And we can see these two components here. So this progress bar component only has one value passed into it, and it'll be the progress value variable, which will be updating in real time. And then we also have our button, which just has an on-click callback. So whenever we actually click this button Start Task, what it's doing is it's making a call to our REST API, which is a Django REST API, and it's hitting this endpoint with a post request, and it's passing in an attribute called target name. So we're hitting this endpoint called start hit job, and then we're passing in the target name Keanu Reeves. And then what happens is once the request comes back, as part of this Django REST view, we return the Celery task ID of the task that has just started. So this .delay will return a Celery object, and inside this object we have the ID of the task that we've just initialized. So it's important that we have this ID so we can actually track the Celery task later on in the future. So what I'm doing is, after the post request has came back successfully and I now have my Celery task ID, I then establish a WebSocket connection here, and this WebSocket connection is being made to localhost, but it's /task/progress, and as part of the URL parameter, I'm also passing in the ID of the Celery task that I've just started. And then I'm going to be listening to events on my WebSocket connection. So each time an event comes in, I'm going to be parsing the data that's received. And then as part of this data that is received, it contains the latest progress result. So you can see here that there's a console.log that occurs each time a new message is received through the WebSocket connection. And we can see these console.logs displayed here. So we can see that each time it comes through, we have a progress attribute and a status attribute. And each time those messages come through, they're outputted to the console.log. And we also have our progress bar, which is updated to reflect these new values. So this progress is a percentage, which is why we're multiplying it by 100 here on the front end, just to make it compatible with our progress bar component. So that's just a quick overview of how things are actually working on the web application side of things. So now let's take a look at how the backend is operating. So now that we have some context on how things are working in the web application, let's take a greater dive into how things are working in the backend. So as we previously mentioned, we have this Django REST endpoint called start new hit job, and after a successful response has been returned, it contains the ID of the new Celery task that we have just generated. So with this task ID, we establish a new WebSocket connection, and the task ID is included as part of one of the URL parameters of our WebSocket connection. So let's take a look at the logic that is actually handling the WebSocket connection. So in Django channels, we have a concept called a consumer, and the consumer is what will be handling the client establishing the connection and the sending and receiving of messages back and forth to the client. So we have here a consumer that we've created called task progress consumer, and we are actually overriding our connect method. And what we're doing is, as part of the connect method, we're going to extract out the task ID from the URL parameters. So the task ID, this will be the task ID of the Celery task that we previously started. And then it's important to note that as part of Django channels, each time you establish a new WebSocket connection, Django channels will generate a unique identifier for that new WebSocket connection, and it's called channel name. So what we're doing is that we are subscribing this WebSocket channel that has just been created by our client, and we're subscribing the channel name to a group, and the group is going to be called the task ID of the Celery task. So what this means is that if we send any messages from Celery into a group called the task ID, it means that the channel will be listening to messages coming through on that group. So the group is a way of subscribing and listening to certain topics within your WebSocket connection. And in this case, we're subscribing the channel and listening to events that are occurring that are related to our Celery task. So that's a little bit covered around how the connection is being established. And then we also have a method in here called Celery task update. So this function is what actually gets triggered each time our Celery worker sends a message to our WebSocket connection. So here we have a Celery task called start new hit job, and it's calling this function async to sync, and it's doing a group send, and the group name is the task ID, and it's saying that the type here is Celery task update, and it's going to contain a message, which is a JSON dictionary that contains the progress and the status. So what the Celery what's happening here in a nutshell is that we're sending a message to the group called the task ID, and then this type is saying that we're going to trigger this function here, Celery task update, and as part of the function trigger, we are going to have this message attribute, which will essentially contain the progress state of our Celery task. So we can see here that it's getting the message attribute from the event received, and then it's sending it to our client, which is our React web application, and we can see those messages coming through on our console.log, which was previously shown. So we can do some logic, and then we can send an update to our web application on how things are going. So here what I'm doing is I'm generating a random number between 1 and 10, and then I'm just doing a sleep, and then I'm sending another update. So this is just to simulate some long running Celery task that might be occurring inside of your project. And each time the sleep completes, it's just sending another update to our client. So we're triggering that method called Celery task update, and we also have our message attribute, which contains the actual progress update, and then that is being handled by our consumer. The consumer detects this method being called, and then this self.sendJSON is actually what is sending the message back to our web application client, and then the web application client will receive it, and then we can do the other logic that was previously mentioned, such as updating the progress bar or doing a console.log, for example. So that's just a quick overview on how to get started with updating a progress bar to reflect your Celery task processing state, and then also how to send WebSocket connection updates from your Celery worker back to your web application. So this is a lot more efficient than having some polling method. So you could have as an alternative, you could have an endpoint that you could hit every 15 seconds to get the latest status on a Celery task, but one of the disadvantages of that is that it will not be real time, and there will be a gap in time where things aren't kept in sync, essentially. So that's just a quick overview, and if you have any questions, feel free to comment below. Thanks.